This podcast is co-created and co-produced by Food Allergy Institute and the 12 Company. Listeners should know that the podcast host, Lesley-Anne Stone, is not a physician nor a licensed medical professional, and the purpose of this podcast is strictly limited to storytelling. Any content shared within the podcast is not intended to be medical advice and should not be used for diagnosis or treatment purposes. All listeners are urged to consult their healthcare providers. The creators, hosts, and guests of this podcast are not liable for any decisions or actions taken by any persons who claim to rely upon the content of this podcast.
I remember when I found out that my kids had food allergies, calling my mom and telling her about it. And, my husband's first reaction was like, oh, they'll never eat a Snickers bar. And I'd be like, I know, and they can't go get ice cream with their friends at the ice cream store. And that was hard for me to think that they wouldn't have those experiences. And so to find this place and to find Dr. Andawa and to find this program was life-changing. And I am grateful for it every day since we found it.
Hi, my name is Lesley-Anne Stone, and this is Resilience and Hope, a Food Allergy Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. I just adore our guest today. Her name is Jessie Rushing, and Jessie is from Michigan. She is a food allergy mom. She has 3 kids who all graduated from the Tolerance Induction Program. And she is going to share her story today with us about how she found the Food Allergy Institute and what it was like traveling from Michigan to Long Beach, California with 3 kids to complete the Tolerance Induction Program. So please welcome my friend, Jessie. Hey, Jessie.
Hi, Lesley-Anne. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So let's just tell the story first of how we met.
Okay.
It's unique, right?
It is.
So my husband, Dave, and your brother work together. They're colleagues.
They were. And Chris had called me and said, I have a colleague who is putting his kid in an allergy program. He has a severe allergies to lots of things, including peanuts. And I think you should talk to them because he's in the program. It seems to be going well. And I think you might benefit from just talking to them. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. But I'd like to put you in touch. I guess Chris and Dave exchanged information for us. And I called you, and calling you was the first beacon of hope that I had since my kids were diagnosed with food allergies. It was a light at the end of the tunnel. And I cannot thank you enough for talking to me and for introducing me to this program because it's life-changing.
We connected when Sam was in the program. He hadn't graduated yet.
Correct.
And I remember you and I feel like we're kindred spirits. The way we
100%.
Yeah. The way we managed our kids' allergies, it was all hands on deck. We were overly cautious. There was nothing we wouldn't do for them and to keep them safe. And I remember you were like, okay, I'm going to track Sam's journey until he graduates the program before putting myself on the wait list. And I was like, just put yourself on the wait list now.
And I remember, I think one of the reasons that Chris introduced us is because he knew the life we lived was very overwhelming of trying to keep all 3 kids away from all of their allergens. And I remember when our kids had first gotten diagnosed, the doctors just said, well, you just have to avoid it for the rest of your life. That's the treatment. There's nothing else you can do. And I just remember feeling very defeated. And I think he had talked to your husband about, how you guys lived your life and how this was changing that. And I think he was, like, you should really talk to her because she knows what you're going through. And I think you would benefit from it. I
remember I would call you or text you, but I think it was a phone call most of the times after every appointment, after every challenge.
I know, and I was shocked. I mean, the first time I talked to you, you had told me some of the appointments you'd already had. And I just thought, there's a better way. It was so hopeful and a little glimmer of light that my kids could live a different life than they were told that they could live. I talked to my husband and he was pretty skeptical of it. He had said, look, the allergists that we've seen a couple of them. They say the same thing. This sounds very different than what the doctors that we go to say. It doesn't sound like anyone else in the country is doing this. Very far away. I'm not sure about it. And I said, after talking to you, I said, I'm just going to put us on the wait list. Because at that time, the wait list was something like a year to 18 months. And it was free to put us on the wait list. So I said, let's just do it because there's no harm in doing it. It won't cost us anything. And when they call our name, if we do not feel comfortable, we can say, no, thank you. But if we continue to think about it, it's just pushing it off down the road. So I'm so glad. I'm just so grateful for you because I hung up the phone. And I think literally that night at like 11:30 at night, I put ourselves on the wait list and we got called 14 months later.
And what happened those 14 months later? You and your husband, what happened? He's skeptical.
Oh, he was still skeptical. He was skeptical until we went out to California. So we got the email, I think it was, and a text. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, did just one get off the wait list or can all three come? You know, what happened? And we had a pre-call with them about a week later. And that was in March. And then we booked our appointment to come out in May. So all 5 of us went out. And we got to meet Dr. Randhawa, which was fantastic. I mean, he was our appointment. That was who our appointment was with, which I know is not the case anymore. But he sat with us for 3 hours and talked to us about the overall idea of the program, all the biomarkers they look at, why he thinks allergies are, more prevalent now than they used to be. He went through family history. He went through all sorts of things. And it was so data driven that at the end of that appointment, my husband, who is a very numbers guy, was sold.
You were off to the races.
Yes.
You were off.
Yes.
Remind me the allergies that all your kids had.
Sure. So my oldest and my middle kid both are allergic to peanuts and tree nuts, all tree nuts. And then my youngest was peanuts. He was high risk because he had 2 siblings that had it. We got him tested. It said the likelihood was that he would be allergic to peanuts. What's interesting is my middle child was the one that first had the reaction when she was 1 year old. And so she is what sort of brought us into the allergy world. Her lips swelled, tongue swelled, a horrible, scary situation. And after that, after figuring out what was going on, I realized that my oldest had avoided nuts. He would try to eat a peanut butter and spit it out and be like, oh, my tongue hurts. But he just avoided it and never wanted it. So we got him tested too. And he actually had his skin tests and all that would blow up much bigger than my daughter's. So it was amazing. No, I think when we went in that May and they did the breathing, the blood, and the skin, his biggest welt was to cashew. And I remember Dr. Randhawa saying, oh, that's one of the bigger cashew welts I've ever seen. And I was like, oh,
wow. Wow. Well, that reminds me of Sam, because when we did the testing with Dr. Randhawa, his walnut blew up and we never gave him walnuts before. Why would I give him walnuts if he's allergic to peanut? We had so allergic. Yeah, it's shocking.
It's crazy. And I think one of the benefits was I felt like we knew the information now. Whereas I feel with the old allergists, they just sort of test it and they say, yeah, they're allergic to peanuts. Well, what does that mean? Just avoid it. Doesn't matter. They could be a little bit allergic. They could be a lot bit allergic, but you don't know. Just don't test it. I mean, don't, test the waters on it, or just avoid it. And I feel as though this program gave us so much information that they were able to say, these are the anaphylactic ones, these are the sensitized ones, and these are the tolerated ones, and how they start with things that have similar proteins and work their way up. That just made so much sense to me. And it just felt like we had the information and we weren't just guessing. And that's what I felt the old system was. And that not guessing and having a roadmap was so helpful in where we were in our situation.
100%. I felt 100% the same. I felt like we were kind of just shooting in the dark.
Yes.
Before.
Yes. Always. And that was giving me so much anxiety, right?
Yes.
Well, I hope it's okay. I mean, they would say, is he airborne to peanuts? Well, I don't think he's airborne. Well, how will I know? Well, he'll have a reaction. Well, I don't really want to wait till he has a reaction. I mean, it wasn't.
And what type of reaction? What type of reaction? It's so vast and scary. And
it was very vague. And this was a very clear path with information and, how the skin cells on your back are related to your gut and how all the things. And it just made sense as to why they were reacting to certain things and not others. I mean, I think one of the first things they had were pine nuts, which we had avoided because they said just avoid all tree nuts. And I remember thinking, it's okay to do this. And they'd say, yes, look at these numbers. And this is why we start here. And these are the proteins that match. And this is what we're working up towards. And that gave me so much comfort to start the journey.
Amazing. So what was it like coming in from out of state?
It was a lot. If I'm being completely honest, it was a lot. I mean, we had to come every 2 months. Thankfully, my kids' schools were really great. We went to them that summer and said, we're going to California every 2 months for a treatment, for medical treatment. Sometimes my kids will be out 2 days a week. Sometimes it might be 5, depending on what we're doing out there. But yeah, we would, try to get the early flights, because I remember researching that early flights are great because the plane has really been cleaned the best then, and you haven't had a whole day of people eating peanuts on the plane. We would have to call ahead to the airline and say our kids have, peanut and tree nut allergies. And sometimes the airline would, not hand out peanuts or almonds, but sometimes they would say, well, we'll give you a 3-row buffer. So we never knew exactly what we were going into. We would wipe down all the seats and the trays because we did not want to have a reaction in the air. And then we would, fly out there. It's a 5-hour flight. And then we would get there and pretty much, have appointments the next day. Sometimes we would, try to do it in a very short 48-hour period, and sometimes we would extend it. It was, initially it was going out with being a little nervous, but then once we started to have treatment foods and maintenance foods, we would have to bring all those with us. And my kids were on SLIT, so we would have to bring SLIT with us, because if we were going to be out there for multiple days, they couldn't miss that. So it was a lot of packing with ice packs and telling TSA. I think at one point we had a doctor's note from Dr. Randawa that said, these things are medically necessary. They can take them on the plane. It was a lot to bring with us. Now we sort of got good at it as we, after probably like the third or fourth time we've done this, we know what we're doing, how we pack all the stuff, what we have to say to TSA. Like we bring bags of wipes, which always set off the alarm in the TSA. The big, I don't know why. So we'd pull it out. This is a bag of wipes. The time change was hard. We get out there. I really tried for morning appointments because my kids would be awake at like 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. 3 kids, it was difficult in some ways because usually one kid would be nervous. We rarely went where all 3 kids were totally fine and happy to go to the doctors. So you try to manage that, and we managed it by having like a pump up list on our way to of music on the way to the doctor's office, and everyone's best, favorite songs and high energy, so that we would try to change the mood. Sometimes we would try to, we would plan other things to do while we were there. So it wasn't just about a doctor's appointment. We would spend some time at the beach, or we would go to Disney sometimes, because it was just something different that my kids could look forward to, instead of, okay, we have to go and eat these nuts that I'm nervous about eating. So looking back on it, yeah, it was a lot, but every day we put one foot in front of the other, and we would say, we know that the end goal is going to be life-changing. So each day, especially when it's really hard, you just have to like buckle down and be like, I don't have to focus on the fact that I have to eat these again next week, or I'm changing to a new nut. Today, what do we have to do? Today, we just have to eat this one, or just do this appointment, and we can worry about the next stuff down the road. So
if your youngest was just allergic to peanut,
yes,
and correct me if I'm wrong, you thought he might have a tree nut allergy because your other kids did.
We did.
But you learned through testing that he didn't.
He did not, which was great. It was lovely, and a huge surprise though. So, and he tolerated all tree nuts, had no issues whatsoever. So it really was
amazing.
Peanuts. Yeah, it was amazing. So my 2 oldest were generally on the same track the whole time. Sometimes they had different amounts, but they would both be, trying the same treatment nuts or being on the same maintenance nuts, which was helpful. But my youngest, because he was just peanuts, started right out eating peanuts. And when we left after that first week of appointments, he was supposed to eat 8 peanuts a day at my house, when my other 2 were allergic to peanuts. And I remember being so overwhelmed, thinking, how am I going to do this? And once we figured out the best way that he would eat it, we tried peanut butter. He didn't like the texture. He ended up liking peanuts crushed up in cupcakes. And I was like, I don't care if you eat a cupcake every day. It doesn't matter to me, because at the end of it, this you're not going to have to worry about this anymore. So if you eat a cupcake for 2 years every day, I'm okay with it. But I had a really good friend of mine who I called up and said, I don't think that I can make these peanut cupcakes in my kitchen because it just contaminates everything. And I will be so overwhelmed worrying about if my other kids are going to get it because it's, the same cupcake tin. It's the same utensils. It's the same counter space. So she would let me go to her house and bake cupcake muffins, and I would crush them up. I'd stir them in, bake the thing, and then I'd bring it home. And we fortunately had a bathroom in our basement, and my youngest and I would go down there every day and we would eat the cupcake. It sounds silly now when I talk about it, but
I get it.
We would go eat it downstairs, and then we would take a quick rinse off, and then while the other two were still in school, and then we go pick them up. So that was sort of the contaminated area in our house, and we all knew it. And we'd throw the stuff in the laundry when we were done, and we'd go about our day. But it was until my older kids got to peanut, that is what we did when he had to eat that every day.
It's amazing.
Amazing the things you go through, right? For your kids, you adapt. And if this is the way you do it, this is what you do. So looking back on it, it seems silly, but it worked.
It's not silly. It's what you had to do. And your total treatment for all three kids, I know your youngest was a shorter amount of time, but you're looking at coming from Michigan to California every other month.
It was about 15 appointments. And we started in May of 2018. And my two oldest graduated in January of 2021.
So when you were coming from Michigan to California, and I'm sure your friends and your community was like, what? What are you doing?
Yes.
There's always a hater. There's always somebody.
Yes.
What would people say to you, and how would you react?
There were obviously people that were incredibly supportive. And a lot of those were people that were close to us that saw sort of how we lived our life day to day. And how like my kids, we had another really good friend that when my oldest would go play at his house, she would say, I just want you to know, I bought goldfish and Cheez-Its and I haven't opened them. So these are a brand new bag of goldfish that no one's put their hands in from eating peanut butter cookies or whatever. And that was, she didn't have to do that. That was so lovely that she was willing to go above and beyond to make me and to make my son feel safe to be there. So those people were very supportive. But yeah, there's always a side eye of like, well, can't you do this in Michigan? Why do you have to go all the way to California for this? There is, at the time when we started, there was a doctor about 40 minutes from our house that did OIT. And I remember looking into it initially and thinking the end goal was to eat a half or one peanut a day for the rest of your life. And I just didn't think that was feasible, nor did I think that was really a good goal. I don't think I could say to my kids, we're going to do this program, and at the end of it, you get to eat one peanut, but we still have to be cautious about eating a lot of peanuts. So, when you go to a restaurant, don't order a peanut dish. Make sure the person next to you is not ordering that. And if you missed that, if you stopped taking it once a day, it would backfire on you. And that seemed very tenuous and not doable. So I remember trying to explain it to some people. I would say, no, this is very different. It is not OIT. It is not anything you've heard of before. Honestly, I would say that Dr. Randhawa is a genius and he is doing like miraculous work out there. And I'm so grateful that he is. But yeah, they'd say, isn't that expensive? Isn't that, overwhelming for your kids to be gone from school all the time? It's not really that serious. I think I had a food allergy growing up and I just, it's okay. Do you still have to do it? Your kids could live with it, and they could live with it. Yes. But I didn't want that for them.
Why would you want that? Yeah.
I remember calling, I remember when I found out that my kids had food allergies, calling my mom and telling her about it. And, my husband's first reaction was like, oh, they'll never eat a Snickers bar. And I'd be like, I know, and they can't go get ice cream with their friends at the ice cream store. And that was hard for me to think that they wouldn't have those experiences. And so to find this place and to find Dr. Randhawa and to find this program, was life-changing. And I am grateful for it every day since we found it.
And your kids now eat whatever they want, whenever they want.
Complete food freedom. I mean, I remember being like, what do you mean by food freedom when I would talk to you initially? And we would, in our first appointment at the clinic and thinking, like literally anything they want? And he'd say yes. And he'd say, the whole goal is to have them be tolerant of these allergens. And he said the definition of tolerance is like large amounts infrequently. So yeah, I want them to be able to go have pad thai on Monday and then, not have to eat it again for a week, because that is normal human behavior. And their immune system needs to get to that point. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, if that's where we could get to, that would just be, and you have little glimmers of well, I would be okay even if we got to cross contamination. I remember thinking that when I was first looking at OIT, and they were like, no, that's not a good goal. That's not anything. You need to get to complete food freedom. My kids are all very different, and my oldest remembers not being allowed to eat anything, but having restrictions on what he could eat. So it took him longer, and admittedly still today, he struggles sometimes to eat them, and struggles by he is not interested in doing it. Hey, you need to eat some walnuts today. I'm going to pass. You're like, you're not. I mean, there's a little teenager thrown in there.
Yes.
Now. I mean,
yes.
My other two have no problems. They toss them down. They cover them. They douse them in chocolate and throw them down the hatch. They love peanut M&Ms. And the fact that we are here eating peanut M&Ms in my house, and I do not care about it one bit, is something that I think I was scared to hope for. And after I met you and we went to the clinic, it was something that I was like, no, I'm not scared anymore to hope for that. We're just going to get through the program to get there, because it's amazing on the other side. It's amazing.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
Tell us about your sister, because there's a whole part two. The story continues. This is an amazing part of your story. The story of your sister is amazing to me.
So my younger sister has a son who is the same age as my youngest. And they found out pretty early on that he had an allergy to sesame. And everyone has their own allergy journey. Everyone is different. She was not as stringent as we were. And that it worked for them for a long time. So I think having a sesame allergy didn't necessarily impact their day-to-day like my kids' allergies impacted mine for whatever reason. So he had sesame, and recently the labeling laws changed to add sesame to be one of the allergens that they have to label for. Well, what some of the companies did, especially sort of bread companies, was instead of, saying may contain or made on the same equipment, they started adding sesame and sesame seeds to a lot of breads, bagels, hot dogs, buns, hamburger buns. And so things that had been previously safe for my nephew were no longer safe. And I remember she called me and said, he went to school and came home and he's covered in full body hives. And I can't figure it out. There's not we didn't change laundry detergent. He's eating the same thing he's been eating for, the last year at school for lunch. And finally, a day or so after she was trying to solve the problem, she looked at the hot dog buns and they now had sesame. And she was shocked that something that had previously been safe was now no longer safe. And it started to affect their life in a much different way. Because now, sandwiches and all sorts of things that he could previously eat were now off limits. So I remember her calling and saying, I think we're considering that allergy place you go to. What's the name of it again? And, can you give me the information? And I was so happy. I mean, I want everyone who has an allergy, a food allergy, to go here because it's so wonderful. And I want to shout it from the rooftops anytime someone asks me about it. I will talk your ear off, obviously, about it. And I'll be like, you should really go. Your kid would love it. But I also don't want to pressure you. So I told her all along, it's been great. It's really hard day to day. We got to the end. It is completely 180 degrees different. But she was fine until she wasn't fine. And then, so they just started this fall. I think it's hard. It's hard in the trenches. It's hard.
And she's flying in from Michigan now too.
She is now also flying in from Michigan. Yes.
Unbelievable.
I know. And I do think the clinic, there's more and more people that are traveling, right? I think when we started, we were the first people from Michigan. I remember. And now there's people from I don't know if it's all
over the world. All over the world.
Internationally coming in. They have worked out a lot of kinks about traveling with your food and traveling, all sorts of things and getting you the stuff that you need. So that's really lovely.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah.
That Chris and Dave at work were talking about it. Chris said, you should call Lesley-Anne. We hit it off. We are kindred spirits. We're totally on the same wavelength. So what's your advice, your final advice for anybody who is out of state who are considering the program? So
I think you should absolutely do it. If you ever want someone to hold your hand, you can, I would be happy to talk to you and walk you through it. It's a lot. It is a lot. And I am not trying to diminish that in any way. But every day, if you just keep putting, one foot in front of the other, and at the end of it, and in reality, it might feel long when you start, but 2.5 years, 3 years, and you and your kid can have a completely different life is truly amazing. Miraculous.
It is the best investment that you can make in your family.
100%. I would do it all again.
It's obviously an investment for your child and the biggest gift you can give your child, but it is an investment for our family. Our life would be different in every single aspect if we did not find this program.
I feel the same way. We take trips now, and I think, gosh, remember how we used to have to, if we would take a road trip somewhere, we would have to pack a lot of snacks because I wouldn't know if we stopped somewhere if there'd be something for you. And just little things like that added up on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis is huge, that you don't have to think about that you can literally just go to a restaurant, any restaurant that anyone picks. You don't have to call ahead, look at the menu, talk to a manager. Those things add up.
Jessie, how many years out are you now in the program?
4 years. Yeah. It's unbelievable. And yeah, my kids sometimes grumble about eating nuts, but I remind them, if you do you want to go back to what it was? No, I definitely don't. They appreciate it too, especially my oldest, because he definitely remembers, wiping down plane seats and being worried about his friends. He had reactions from friends who were eating peanut butter sandwiches, and then would boys being boys, grab their face or something. And you're just, to be able to be a kid and interact with other kids in a way that you don't have to worry about having a reaction that will send you to the hospital is indescribable what it has given us, the gift of that. Because, that's really it. My kids have been to the hospital for reactions. My kids have and to not have to worry about that and to let them interact and not sitting in the back being like, oh, please don't. I just saw you eat that peanut butter cookie. Please don't go over and give my kid a hug, and not have to worry about that it's wonderful. It really is wonderful.
And they will thank their uncle. Thank you, Chris.
And they will thank their uncle.
Thank you, Chris. Well, Jessie, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your incredible story.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
And thank you, listeners, for joining in with us today. If you have any questions, comments, want to know more, write to us. We have a Gmail account, resilienceandhopepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram @resilienceandhopepodcast. And we're asking you to please subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple, Spotify. Please give us 5 stars. Please drop us a review. We would really, really, really appreciate it. And until next time, I am Lesley-Anne Stone, and this is Resilience and Hope, a Food Allergy Podcast. Resilience and Hope Podcast, made possible thanks to the support of Food Allergy Institute.